I, 55 male, just lost my wife, 56 female, to cancer. My late wife's entire life was about her 30-year-old daughter who suffers from Down syndrome and has never and will never have the ability to live independently. Nor will she ever have the ability to exercise any real amount of emotional impulse control. And before you all start in on the evil stepdad who doesn't care to understand line of thinking, I want to add that I have been in her life since she was 5 and spent years fearing the day where she was physically developed to the point where punches, scratches, and throwing things were a real threat. Once that happened, all of my wife's friends stopped visiting our house. One of them even said that her uncle deals with vicious dogs for a living, and she feels safer around his workplace than at our house. Many times I have ended up needing to go to the doctors for the crime of sitting in the same room as my stepdaughter and having her attempt to pound my head in, throw a heavy object at me, or trying to choke me after I had fallen asleep. My late wife was the only one who could reliably calm her down. When we started using caregivers for my stepdaughter after my wife was diagnosed, they would be asking me whether I could enlighten them on a better way to explain things to my stepdaughter when she was going ballistic. When even they, who were used to explaining things to people who just didn't get things, were still struggling and asking for insight. When my late wife was diagnosed, the first word out of her mouth was my stepdaughter's name. She cried every day for what was to become of her. In her desperation, she tried to press the doctor for chemotherapy when it no longer made sense, turned to alternative medicine, despite it making her feel worse, saying she would have stopped all treatment if she was only leaving behind an employable, functioning 30-year-old. On her deathbed, she made me promise to not let her fall into the hands of a state care facility. I promised her because I didn't have the heart not to. But now, after my grief fog has cleared 2 months later, my stepdaughter remains the same. She doesn't understand her mom is dead, only that she's gone and is angry at me for it. Saying she'll be good, so bring her back. Caregivers are expensive. I don't make much. I didn't resent any medical expenses when it was my wife, but I admit that I resent my stepdaughter. My own grown kids won't visit with her around. If I hadn't made the deathbed promise, the decision would have been easy. I made the decision that I needed to put her in a state-run facility, as even with my wife leaving me everything, I couldn't afford anything better. Now, family members are calling me the evil stepdad and a mother's worst nightmare. Am I the a-hole? Next story. I, 34 male, and a dad of 4, 13 male, 11 female, 11 male, and 8 male. Our youngest has some significant sensory issues and anger management issues, which he is being evaluated for. Important info for context. He's already been diagnosed with ODD, but this goes beyond that. My sister, 34, my twin, has a 12-year-old daughter, Jane, who is a spoiled, rotten kid. She is an only child, and my sister puts a whole new meaning to gentle parenting. As in, she doesn't parent because her kid is just expressing herself, and she doesn't want to parent out her personality, which sucks. I love my niece to the depth of my being, but I do not like her or my sister. I don't know how else to put it. On Saturday, we had a memorial of life service for my uncle, who passed away months ago. It was held at my brother's house. There were probably about 12 kids there. We got 40 of those 60-pack water balloon things and let the kids go ham. It was a huge ordeal. However, my youngest at some point decided the water was too much for him to handle, said he was done playing, and came to sit by me and dry off. He was being great, which I was grateful for because he has a lot of bad days. But my niece kept coming up and throwing more water balloons at him after she was asked to stop. It was causing him to spiral, and he started raging out, basically, and my sister was telling me to calm my kid down and tell him to stop being a baby. She didn't want to get wet, so every single time he went to throw one back, she would start screaming, telling him to stop. At that point, my sister got involved as well and yelled at my son saying, "Don't you dare," she said, "not to get her wet because she's wearing white and it'll be see-through." I told her to tell her daughter to stop throwing water balloons at my son because he had already said to stop, and she said he's already fucking wet. So basically, my niece was perfectly fine to throw shit at my kid, who had asked her to stop repeatedly, but they weren't letting him defend himself. The last time my niece came up to him, I spoke up and said, "Don't think about it." She didn't listen and threw it anyways, so I grabbed the hose beside me and drenched her for a solid 30 seconds. She immediately starts crying and covering herself and goes to hang out in my sister's car. My sister starts berating me and stating that I knew it was going to make her clothing see through and decided to be a creep anyways. My mom and father kicked her out for that comment. I'm getting texts from my brother-in-law stating that I'm a pig and what I did was uncalled for and abusive and that I would never be allowed around my niece again because I'm inappropriate. Am I the a-hole?